Why do hires wear eye patches? Because they can't afford an iPad? And what is a hired's favorite class?
Art.
That was a good one.
Is that better? Am I getting better? At least warming up and moving in the right direction, maybe? Yeah? Yeah, I'll take that as a yes. All right. We are ready for the next session. Take it away, Brent.
Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me adequately? All right. Well, hey, I'm glad to see everybody here. This is my first time in Lincoln. So far, it's pretty cool. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to get started right away because I've got a lot of material. Somebody at the last Agile session told me that I had a very pithy talk. I was hoping they weren't listening. My talk is essentially about Agile culture, what that is, and how we can achieve it. And to tell you a little bit about why I did it, how I came up with this, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was a software engineer for 3 years. I come from the old Great Lakes up in Madison. I was there for 15 years. And, you know, I come from a technical background, but I'm a product owner now. So, you know, my main role is working with our clients. But one of the things that I started to notice when we began to adopt Agile is that people struggle, not just as an organization with Agile concepts, but they struggle personally with them. And that struck me as odd. I had to remember back to when I first encountered Agile. It was quite a while ago. I was at a talk by some of the Agile Manifesto guys. It was Martin Fowler and Richard Martin. And I remember how I reacted. I heard about this transparency and these you know, daily stand-ups. And I thought to myself, this is really nothing but, you know, a scheme from management to get people to do more work for less money. And I had a very negative view of it. And I thought to myself, you know, oh my God, you know, and then we're all going to sit together, and how am I going to browse the internet? You know, how am I going to get a break? People are going to be this peer pressure, you know, and I started to think about that. I was really digging in my heels, and I had to think back about it when I started to work with new teams. And I just recently started working with a new team that is new to Agile, and that's kind of what inspired me to talk. And so I want to ask all of you, as we're going through these principles, think about how you first felt when you encountered some of these Agile principles and how that made you feel. That might give you some insight. Now, another thing that got me interested in this is that before I was a software engineer, I used to work in psychiatric hospitals as a psychiatric counselor. I have a degree in psychology. And one of the things that I often try to help people do is to reframe how they think about their reality, but also how they think about their identity within that reality, because that hangs a lot of people up. They get hung up on this idea about who they are and, you know, what is the meaning of what they're doing. And that can be a big challenge to somebody, because Agile will do that to you. Coming into an Agile environment, if you haven't been in one and you start to work agilistically, as I like to say, will challenge you to think about who you are. So that's an important concept. And a big part of what I always had to do when I worked in mental health was to help people get above the line. I'm going to use that term a lot, above the line to below the line. It comes from the education world, and I'll go into that a little bit more, but getting people to be in a positive place. So that's a little bit more about me and about why I didn't talk. So a couple of things that I want to lead off with and kind of give some context before I dive into what I call the top 10. Cultural challenges to IT. So they did this annual State of Agile survey, and the 9th annual one, I'm not sure what year that was, identified the leading causes of failed Agile products. And the red ones there, company philosophy or culture at odds with core Agile values, 42%. Lack of support for cultural transition, 36%. So this whole idea of a cultural change, you know, is really important to getting Agile working effectively for your organization. We've all probably heard the old culture eats strategy for lunch, right? Best laid plans will go awry if you don't manage how your company thinks about its culture, right? We've all seen, you know, Office Space If you haven't, I highly recommend it, right? It's all about working in the cube jungle. But it's a really interesting thing because what we find is that there's a lot of cultural things that in IT are kind of common across all IT organizations, right? And that's why that movie was so successful. So a lot of people related to it, you know. People tend to adopt the culture of their company. I was a consultant for years before, in between my mental health gig and working for LNK. So when I was a consultant, I noticed that companies are really, really different when you go from one company to another. And how they think about their work and how they think about their people really varies. And you tend to fall into it. When I was working, you know, for a company that had a real closed culture, I got that way. You know what I mean? You start to just absorb it through osmosis. And that culture is always in a constant state of flux, and that's an important thing. It's not like you go to a company and the company, oh, they have a bad culture, and it's just going to be that way. Companies' cultures can change really quickly, especially when there are big things going on. And sometimes, you know, that can be managed. That's an important thing. A company's culture has to be actively managed, and a lot of, there are people that specialize in that, setting the cultural tone for companies. And Agile plays a big part in that. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. What is an Agile culture? I think at its core, we can talk about it as the values and habits, how we do our work, how we set up our processes, but a lot of it is how we think about it, about what we're doing, how we're structuring our teams. But I'll get into this Agile mindset graphic here. I know it's kind of small and you might have trouble seeing it. The left side is doing Agile, right? When we talk about the left brain, sort of logical tasks. This is about structure, frameworks, right? You know, ceremonies, things like that. Whereas the right side, we talk about being Agile. This is more the cultural, emotional part of it. We're talking about principles about openness, courage, transparency, trust, collaboration. This is kind of what I'm talking about in the talk today, is the right side, being Agile, right? So one of the things that many of you have probably seen is that if you take a mature Agile team and you take away their structure and their policies and their practices, they'll, generally speaking, keep working in an Agile fashion, even without having that framework and structure around it, because they like it. They've already had that internal change in how they think about the work they're doing. If you add Agile structure, policies, and ceremonies to a non-Agile team, they won't automatically become Agile. In fact, oftentimes they'll, really implode. They really struggle with it, right? And so that's an important understanding when you talk about what is Agile culture, right? It's having internalized those principles and changed the way we think about not just our work, but about ourselves in many ways. The key to achieving, I think, that Agile culture, a lot of it's leadership, some of it's mentoring, education, experience, but I find a lot of it's just practice and time, and most importantly, success, right? Eventually, we start to see results, but it takes a while, right? So that's, part of the curve that we go through. But we can do a lot to help people get through that curve, I think. So why do people struggle with Agile? And I think in IT, there are a couple of reasons. There's been a lot of research done on, the Myers-Briggs personality types and, who is working for us in IT, right? It's these INTJs. Now, I'm not a huge Myers-Briggs guy. I come from a scientific psychology background, and I tend to think of this as pop psychology, but there's some truth to it. I think that's why people like it. And we have these 5 dominant developer personality types, and people of those personality types like repeatable processes, unambiguous solutions, certainty of results, well-defined tasks, and most importantly, documentation. So a lot of it is stuff where we like to know that we're going to be successful. We're risk averse in many cases, and that's one of the things that I think we struggle with is that we're often risk averse. The other big challenge is, I think, generational. A lot of the people who structured our environments that we work in are baby boomers, and there's a certain set of generational values. Now, I don't want to overgeneralize because, baby boomers love nothing better than to harp on millennials, right? But there's some truth to a few things. One of the things that boomers often equated was more hours at your desk means you're adding more value, right? And that's not true. It's a Look busy even if you're not, right? These are cultural values that are somewhat outdated. They value individual contributions, and you succeed through heroics, right? So making yourself stand out by coming to the rescue. Don't make waves, get along with others, be tactful. And they like to recognize hierarchy and position. These are all things that don't fit really well in an Agile environment, and they often collide. So these are some of the things where people dig in their heels, right? Some of it's their personality, some of it's how they were raised in IT, right? So what happens when people encounter Agile principles for the first time is they often have this visceral gut reaction like I did, that this is some sort of a brainwashing that management's trying to lay on me so they can get, do more work for less money, right? Which, now I couldn't imagine working not working in an Agile environment. But at the time, I got below the line, as we say, right? When we're below the line, it's immediate. I think you'll hear about it in other talks about, about your neurochemistry getting hijacked by this sort of visceral adrenaline rush that you get when you feel challenged or threatened, right? And that's what happens when we get below the line. We get this thing where we're threatened. We get in the whole, fight or flight, right? We tend to find fault, see failure. We tend to freeze, wait for others, ignore, deny. Whereas when we're above the line, we're in a positive mode. That's when, the positive neurotransmitters are kicking in and we're feeling good about our job. We're feeling great about the environment. We're wanting to move things forward, right? You always know you're below the line. That's when you're thinking, oh God, I'm going to quit my job and go somewhere else, right? Next day, you think, oh, this is the greatest place in the world, and it's all, what's going on in your brain. So, one of the big things I want us to think about is these gut reactions, not just that we're having, but maybe that our coworkers are having when they first encounter some of these Agile principles. So, one of the things that I believe deeply about Agile practice in general is that it comes from above the line. And I think that before I was working in Agile, a lot of what I saw in IT was from below the line. I want to talk about this. When we look at these value statements that we're all pretty familiar with, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. The anti-patterns, i.e. what we value less, are preventative, proscriptive, and defensive. They are below the line practices. They're let's not screw this up. Let's make sure we have guardrails. Let's make sure we have safety nets so we don't screw this up. Let's make sure that we, negotiate the contracts. Let's make pages and pages of documentation so nobody can get it wrong, or they still do. Let's get a lot of processes in place, and let's make sure we have a good plan. Those are all, defensive. When we look at what's on the left, the positive patterns, these are things that are above the line, right? We want to collaborate. We want to respond to change. We want to be adaptive. We want to interact with our peers, right? So I think that's an important thing, to think about. When we first encounter these core Agile principles, what's our gut reaction? I think if we can help people see that we're wanting to come from above the line, that's how we want to work in Agile. That would be kind of my goal. So I want to talk about these 10 sort of Agile principles, and then I'm going to we'll have a little chat about each one. I don't want to go too long on each one. I did it last time I waited until the end to have the chat, and nobody wanted to talk. So we're going to try to talk about these a little bit now after each slide. So one of the big ones that people struggle with, I think, particularly when in organizations that are just adopting Agile, is success through individual heroics, right? And so a lot of companies, that's how they've worked. Great leaps forward, death marches, call them what you will, but they've recognized individual heroics, and they come from a standpoint of succeeding that way. One of the things that companies now are looking at is something called CMMI. Maturity Model Index, capability. Thank you. And a lot of organizations want CMMI level 3, and one of the hallmarks of being a mature IT organization is that you do not succeed through heroics. You have a sustainable, repeatable, and measurable pace. And and that you consistently deliver on that, right? And so this old business of success through individual heroics isn't just an Agile concept. It's also something that the industry is starting to recognize, that we need to move away from success through individual heroics, right? And so the cultural belief behind this challenge to achieving an Agile culture is this belief that more hours spent necessarily means more productivity or more value. And so a lot of the teams that I've worked on in the past were putting in 60 hours a week, right? But they weren't achieving. The project kept falling further and further behind, right? And that's because we were burning people out. And the teams, didn't have a lot of cohesion. So the gut reaction that I always had when I was, first approached with this concept that, we're no longer going to succeed as individuals, we're going to sink or swim as a team. I thought to myself, well, we couldn't possibly get this work done without overtime. How could we possibly do that? We're going to fall behind. And then, of course, the same people always step up and rescue, right? And in my case, I was one of those people that like to, step up and rescue and, get recognized for it. So I was going to lose my status, right? If we quit, doing things that way. It was a personal threat to my identity. So success, moving away from that can be a difficult thing, right? A lot of it is explaining to people how we do that. But I'm curious if anybody has had any experience with this on their teams, moving away from this sort of model where, one person is saving the team or getting where we're sinking or swimming as a team. No.
I just moved to a new team, and that team had a very strong product owner. So a lot of things were driven top down, even though we're supposed to be agile. So that person got to move to a different team when we restructured it, and now it's just kind of floundering because nobody knows how to work without that person.
That's a really interesting thing. I've seen that in a lot of places. Any thoughts on how you would maybe address that within that team?
I don't know yet.
Anybody else ideas?
Part of my role on the other team was I was typically in a leadership role, so I was doing that same type of work, and it's trouble for me.
How do we encourage people to step up and start to participate as a sink or swim team versus having that one person kind of lead the charge all the time?
More inclusive and upfront work.
I think so. A big part of it, I'll get into it later. One of the things that's worked for me, I think, is having people select their own work. Self-forming, which I'll talk about a little bit. I'm going to move on because we're kind of time boxed. So thanks for the input. One of the other things that people dig in, and I've seen people really struggle with, is this idea of incremental requirements. So in the old world, one of the things that we always did was we defined everything down to the nth degree before we ever wrote a line of code, right? So we would write these significant books of requirements. And the challenge, of course, is getting people comfortable with incremental requirements, having more revealed as we go. And of course, the cultural belief underlying that is we really need to know, we should know all the requirements at the start. And there are a lot of people that are very uncomfortable with the concept of starting coding before you really know what you're building, right? And oftentimes that's the case in the modern world. And the gut reaction that a lot of people I've talked to have had when I've asked them is to say, well, if you don't know what the final product is going to look like, how can you know where to start coding? We're going to miss an important requirement, right? So one of the things that I've done to talk people through that is to point out the fact that most of the requirements that we've built into our products over the years were never used. And we can all think of many instances where that happened, where we'd build out a product from at the beginning, from a set of requirements, we'd work on it for 6 months, we'd build this just beautiful, Cadillac application, and then the clients would use one thing, and the rest of it would never be used, and that was just lost value, right? If we had let those requirements evolve and done incremental development, I think we wouldn't have built many of those requirements, or many of those features. So one of the important concepts here that I really try to help people in my teams understand is the value of the work not done. Right? concept that can be fuzzy for people, but doing work that's not adding value is removing the value from what you're doing, from your product. So if you can not do work, other work is going to fill that void, right? More meaningful. So being ruthless about, not doing work that's not adding value is an important concept. And I think that's one thing that has helped people, because we don't want to build stuff that's not going to get used. But at the same time, I know even I've struggled with this. You're supposed to start coding, and we don't really know what things are going to look like. So I wonder if anybody has had experience with this on their teams, with this concept of incremental requirements, and people not comfortable with moving forward until they've got the whole book of requirements.
One of the things that I see, and this isn't just here, but I think before, is the gap between what does it need to do and what does it need to look like. And not to poo-poo on the user experience people, which are wonderful people and I don't have, but if a lot of cars were built out of this beautiful looking shape, and then the engineers trying to cram stuff into it, they start with, let's figure out what we want to need, who cares what it looks like, build the chassis and make it work, and then we build pretty stuff on top. Those two parallel lines don't have to be one after the other, they can work together.
It's a good point, yeah, because in the past I've seen people get the cart before the horse. This is one of the things that we always struggle with. We come to the clients with these beautiful screens, and they love the screens, but we're not so clear on what the functionality is supposed to be behind it. Yeah, that can be done at the same time. Other thoughts on incremental requirements, helping people through that, or helping them to accept that? All right. It can be a challenge for some people. Probably the biggest one, I should say the biggest one. Another one that I know we struggled with at the former Great Lakes is minimum viable product, right? How do we do our work with MVP, right? Because the cultural belief has always been more is better, high quality equals more features, right? So that's how we kind of got noticed. It's what we were known for is these Cadillac web interfaces. And our gut reaction, when we're confronted with this principle, is we need to anticipate our clients' needs. We're going to look bad or incompetent if we come to them with these stick figure web screens. We want to come to them with all sorts of cool ideas, right? And I think that part of that is a challenge to our identities. It's like we prided ourselves on being ideas people, but we were so often designing the apps ourselves, coming to clients with what we felt were important features. But in many cases, they really weren't that useful to the clients. And so we had to, and in many cases we still are, moving away from bejeweling and gold plating our systems. And coming up first with sort of a bare bones version. So our clients can look at it and give us their feedback. It's a different way of working. It, in some ways, can be a threat to our identities. I was a developer, I was an architect, so I felt like it was my job to come up with these really elaborate designs. And when we started to do MVP, I felt like, well, where do I add value? Or how am I going to get noticed? Right? It's a threat. Anybody have any experience with this? Minimum viable product. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it becomes a slippery slope, right? It seems like a lot of times it seems like we struggle for people to get out of the mindset of I have to have everything in my MVP, because I feel like once you say MVP is done, that's it. And I don't think we've transitioned to that mindset of MVP is what we're going to start with, right? And then if there are things that are valuable, we will add them after the fact. But I don't think we've gotten over that hump yet, where people still try to throw everything in it.
Well, I can really relate to that. that too, because so often you'll bring out the MVP and the client will say, yep, that's all we have time for. I think one of the ways that I've approached that too with my teams is to really scale down our MVP. So you deliver an MVP that's really not going to work for the client as it is. But the idea, and a lot of this is educating the client. As a product owner, that's one of the things I do is I educate the client and say, okay, we're going to come to you with a real bare bones rendition just so you can say, yeah, you're going in the right direction. But it's not ready for prime time. Like it couldn't possibly be used type of thing. It doesn't have a login screen. It's something like that, That way we give the client the message, this is not going to be usable, and it's not meant to be usable. It's meant to give you a preview so that you can tell us if we're moving in the right direction. That helped me a little bit. And I think if the clients are okay with it, and getting them okay with it is a big part of the process, educating them to understand that we're going to work this way going forward. We're going to show you, maybe just the stick figures and see if that's right. Once you say, yes, that's right, we're going to keep moving forward, and eventually we'll get you something that will work, but not right out the gate. That helps a little bit. Other thoughts on this one? All right. This next one is, I can perhaps kind of a general term, but I think it's a really important barrier that a lot of us have experienced in Agile transition. The challenge, of course, is embracing frequent change. And in my company, the former Great Lakes, change didn't happen real often. It was very planned. It happened over a cycle of years. And in many companies that I consulted at, companies in the 1980s, the 1990s, even the 2000s, it seemed like we were moving in geologic time on projects compared to what's happening now. Right? There's been a big change in IT where the pace of delivery has really sped up because of competition in the market, because of globalization, because of things moving into the cloud, frameworks being developed to speed development. So we're not spending 6 months to a year building, systems anymore. We're spending, weeks and months only building systems. So the cultural belief behind this, of course, is change is bad, right? In a project, the old mindset was we've got to limit scope. We're going to get these requirements from the clients, but if they want to introduce new requirements midstream, we need to really push back against that. It's going to interrupt our development. It's going to be inconvenient for us. It's going to throw the project back. We're not going to meet our deadlines, right? And our gut reaction, of course, is that we're not going to get it done in time if we don't really, really limit change. Part of the problem with that is that in this environment, we actually can't afford to work in that mode anymore because we need to be doing incremental change as part of the process, or we will miss the mark. And part of what I've talked to my teams about is the fact that we're trying to add value for the client. We're not building a system for ourselves. We're building a system to be competitive in a business environment. If we build this system and we build it for 6 months and we don't change it at all, we're going to come out at the end with something that is not going to add value. You can bet that our competitors are incrementing, are building those changes in as they build. Their product that they're coming out with at the end of 6 months is going to have been adapted regularly throughout development. If we don't do that, we just won't be competitive in the marketplace. I think that's an important understanding. So that when we talk about change, we shouldn't be pushing back from it. We need to actually pursue opportunities for change. It's a completely different mindset. And this is, I think, one of the key things that particularly as a product owner, that I struggled with initially, is this concept that I need to be looking for opportunities for changes that add value. Not just, not trying to protect us from change, but trying to find meaningful change. And I think, too, one of the things that I've found that's helped our teams is if I explain that if the team is having regular collaboration with the client, this rate of change should decrease over time. Once you're getting to the end of the product, of the cycle, you're not going to completely redesign things. But this is a huge mindset change. This is where you kind of go from a black to a white, really, in terms of how we think about change. And I wonder if anybody's had experience with this, with their teams.
I think it's hard to get to hear
That's a good point. What Angela said was, if you come up with too big of an MVP, it's really hard to make changes because you've already sort of got something that looks like it's done, right? It's hard to come up with something really meaningful at the end. Good point. Other thoughts about helping people maybe? How do you help people when they encounter this idea? You've got somebody who's been for 30 years, been working in a change diverse environment, and now they're supposed to actually look for change. How do we get people through that emotionally? I think a big part of it is that concept, that it's incremental. We're going to bring forth a small MVP, and we're going to look for opportunities to improve it, right? And that's something that's on a micro scale and help people make that transition. Move on. Principle number 5, transparency. Achieving transparency is another difficult cultural barrier for a lot of IT shops. It was for me. The cultural belief that I think underlies it is this concept that my work is my business, not yours, right? So mind your business, I'll mind my business. In an Agile team, that's quite a bit different, right? My gut reaction was, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to surf the web anymore without somebody looking over my shoulder, right? I have a straw boss. I'm never going to get to take a break because people are going to know what I'm doing all the time. This is something that a lot of people have struggled with in organizations that I've worked at. Part of the important, I think, understanding about achieving transparency is that the team is going to sink or swim together, right? And there are a lot of difficult conversations that have to be had in retrospectives. And it's important for us to know what each other are doing. Not just on a daily basis, but sometimes on an hourly basis, if the team is going to function really well. And so setting up information radiators so we can see what people are working on in real time. In my team, we use Jira, right? And so we can see every morning at the stand-up who's working on what. And what helps is we can see if somebody's struggling, for example. Maybe they have a ticket for 2 or 3 days and maybe they're afraid to ask for help on it. We can see if things are not moving through quickly enough, or if we've got tickets that are high priority and they're not getting addressed. That's something that's visible instantly to the entire team. You may not even have to be in the stand-up to see it, because if you go into the Jira board, you'll see it instantly. How are we doing on the work that we have, right? That's a real important transparency thing. Stand-ups, retrospectives, really having the concept that it's not my work, it's the team's work. And I'm a member of the team. It's a big change for people emotionally to work in a transparent environment. It was for me. I sat in the same cube for 13 years. We had nice high sides. Nobody could see what I was doing. And I was just mortified about leaving that cube and working in an open collaborative environment. And now I would go back to a cube for all the money in the world. It was just isolating. I really enjoy working in a collaborative environment where there's a lot of transparency. And it was a big cultural change for me. That was mostly me digging into my heels emotionally. Once I got in there, I was like, well, this is really cool. I like this. Of course, I'm a product owner too, so my business is chatting. Anybody have experience with this on your teams? Anybody pushing back on transparency? They don't like it?
Accountability and micromanaging.
Yeah, good point. Angela said, talk about accountability versus micromanaging. I love not having a straw boss standing over my shoulder. People on my team like the fact that I'm not walking around to see what they're doing. I already know what they're doing. We all know what everyone's doing. It's not and we know we're accountable for our work. We take responsibility for our work. So we don't need to have that, under someone's thumb. Did you have something?
I know an example.
Yeah, that's not a facial reaction. I was like, yeah, we all know an example, and sometimes they're, yeah.
I say transparency also helps with the way people want person heroics. So if I know it's time, it have to be the last day of our sprint and sometimes we work on it. It helps working. So
Yeah, great point. Stephen was mentioned that this helps with personal heroics. So if we're being transparent, we can see if somebody's doing all the work, and we can avoid that. And I think all these principles overlap quite a bit. One of the things I find is that they're all part of sort of a mosaic, right? And if you work on one of them, you often get better in other areas. Documentation. This is my favorite one, just because I came from a really, really documentation-heavy environment, right? So, documentation can be a challenge because we have this old cultural belief that everything should be written down, right? I've worked with people who have had this email archive that was just massive, with this like years and years of project-oriented emails. They had elaborate systems for finding, the email communication that they wanted to find. And then when we decided, well, we shouldn't have email. See, big email archives are a bad thing because they can be requested for legal purposes. We're going to get rid of all the email now. That was absolutely terrifying for people. There were people that really had almost a nervous breakdown because they were going to lose 10 years of emails, right? And that was their whole that's how they felt they were adding value. It was a big part of their identity is that they were the human database, right, of every communication that ever happened on a project. So that's part of it, right? But there's also a big part of it, that we're afraid that we're not going to remember the details. And there's also an aspect of it that's the looking busy part, right? We think that just because we're writing a document, we're adding value. And a part of that, too, is this whole paperless concept. I remember thinking when we went paperless and, we started using Confluence or SharePoint, and Jira, I suddenly didn't have the binders, the 3-ring binders anymore in my cube. We had people that had huge libraries of 3-ring binders, right? They took great pride in them. They were all labeled with their projects. And some of the 3-ring binders even had little tabs in them. You could tell the real documentation freaks because the tabs in their binders were typed. You knew you were serious about it then. But it's the whole looking busy thing. I have beautiful binders, and so that means that I'm adding value. How do we deal with this issue now in Agile where, documentation is not such a big thing? It's not exactly true, right? A lot of people are confronted with Agile and they think, well, how do you possibly do software development without any documentation? The answer is we do plenty of documentation in Agile, right? The question to ask is this document going to add value? Does anybody ever read it again? So we went paperless, right? And we were creating lots of Confluence pages. And it's cool to make a Confluence page.